Welcome to Asian Pacific Voices Radio, where you'll find stimulating conversations that explore diverse topics and stories impacting our Asian Pacific American communities. I'm your host, Rasha Goel, and today we are so honored to welcome an acclaimed author and screenwriter whose work explores identity and representation with depth and wit. Born in Los Angeles to Taiwanese immigrant parents, he won the 2020 National Book Award for Interior Chinatown and has written for acclaimed shows like Westworld. He now brings Interior Chinatown to the screen as creator and showrunner of the Hulu series that premiered in November of 2024. It is my great pleasure to welcome Charlie Yu to Asian Pacific Voices Radio. Charlie, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
It is such a pleasure. I had so much fun watching the show, and we're going to dive into that a little bit later. But
Great.
I'd love to start off talking to you about just growing up here in Los Angeles. You grew up as the son of Taiwanese immigrants. So what part of your upbringing do you feel most shaped your voice as a storyteller?
I think as a storyteller, it was watching my parents struggle, strive, really try to learn the ways of a new country. That was like the filter through which I viewed a lot of things, language, them getting better at the language, them encountering obstacles and to some extent discrimination, but also having opportunities and, learning culture, trying to assimilate. I think that their journey as new Americans was really, I find that as I continue to write stories, I keep circling back to themes of family, but also to themes of outsiders, of people trying to understand the rules of the world they're in. Sometimes that takes the form of science fiction. Sometimes it takes a more, sort of naturalistic form. And then in this case, in Interior Chinatown, it took a very kind of strange form, but it's still basically that story.
It's interesting because we never really dive deeper into how much our childhood impacts us, right? Especially those of us who do come from immigrant families. I think there's such a balancing act of when you're growing up between these two cultures. Now, Interior Chinatown, it masterfully blends the satire with serious themes of identity and representation. So talk to me a little bit about what inspired this unique format and, again, taking some of your own experiences to kind of inform the narrative that we see.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's funny. I'm 49 now, and I've got two teenagers. And as they go out, start to grow up and go off into the world, I think about like my path, and what their paths are going to be. And the thing I really want to tell them as a parent, and sometimes I talk to, groups of students or younger writers as well. And the thing I like to say, which is true, is that the path really only is a path in hindsight. I had so many different experiences. I wanted to write, but I was afraid to, and my parents wanted me to be a doctor. And so I tried to do that. And I didn't succeed. I didn't go to medical school. I wasn't admitted to any medical schools. I went to law school. I practiced for years, and all that time I was also writing. And so, I think all of it, like, studying different things at school, having work experiences, having, different groups of friends from different backgrounds. I think all of it really went into it. And then in my late 30s, I had moved from LA to Orange County, where we now live. And I started a new chapter, which was to write for television, which was to write for Westworld. Was my first job in TV. And so I think this kind of, meandering path through almost 40 years led me to this point where I was suddenly had this new career. And also I'd been writing for some time, but I was trying to struggle with what became Interior Chinatown. So it was my fourth book, and I didn't really know how to write it. And like a lot of that in like this kind of chocolate meets peanut butter kind of crazy way, a lot of my life experience is all sort of synthesized into the writing of the book. I didn't really answer your question about how they directly did it, but all of which is to say this kind of, really winding path through the woods led me to the point where I ended up writing this book.
I love it. And I have to throw in there for you too, Charlie. I was supposed to be a pharmacist. That didn't last very long either. And here we are having this conversation. I think that's part of the Asian American narrative itself, right?
Yeah.
And huge fan of Westworld, by the way. So I felt the writing just throughout the seasons on that show. Oh my gosh, it was a complex show. So I highly valued the writers that worked on those episodes. And how long did it take you to write Interior Chinatown, the actual book, and then into develop it into the series?
Oh, a really, really long time. I mean, I'm not really kidding when I say my kids were like, barely into school age when I started the book, which was 2013, roughly 2012, 2013. I started writing the book. Yeah, it took a really, really long time. I had a lot of sort of false starts with that book, and I didn't finish the book until early 2019. So between 6 and 7 years for the novel. I mean, so much so that when I started the book, I think I started it with the mentality of kind of a young man, like the emotionally, the point of view I identified most with was as a son. Willis is a son to his parents in the book, and that's really emotionally where it started. Is the son wants to tell the story of these immigrant parents, and what happened through the course of the writing is that my kids got older, and more I started to identify with this sort of middle-aged dad. So, and then if you add on the years of adapting the show, the Hulu bought the rights in 2020, and the show came out in late 2024. So, I mean, in the middle, there was a pandemic and strike and other things. But on and off, it took, basically 3.5, 4 years to make that show and put it on the air.
Wow.
And so, it was it's been kind of an odyssey.
Yeah, quite and those are the things I love hearing about, because when we watch the show, you don't even know the backstory of it, right? You just think, oh wow, this is so cool. They got a show on air. I'm enjoying watching this, never even realizing the process and the years that it may have taken to get it on. One of the things with the novel is it challenges the idea of being seen as the only generic Asian man. So have you ever had a turning point like that in your life where you were rejected and labeled like that in your own life or career?
I've been labeled. It wasn't exactly rejected, but I remember once early on in my legal career when I had a boss who, was basically, I mean, he was a very kind mentor and well-meaning. And at one point he was saying to me, like, enough of the quiet Asian guy, you need to get out there and be a leader. And I thought that was really, it was a moment where it was both kind of like, it woke me up a bit, to have somebody refer to it that much, because I mean, in that way, it's like, he wasn't saying you're quiet or you're too meek or whatever. He was saying, he was kind of putting a label on it, and he wasn't wrong about me, but at the same time, realizing that, I could be put in a bucket like that. I think that was this kind of moment where my consciousness went, oh, is that how I'm seen, like by the partners at this firm? Is that how I present that? And then realizing also this kind of discomfort of, that is sort of how I move through the world. I sort of, at least at that point, was trying to assimilate and put my head down, sort of the immigrant thing of like, we're child of immigrants, like work hard, don't rock the boat, don't make a lot of noise, and your merit and your hard work will shine through. And so here's this kind of very very positive mentor figure in my life. At the same time, he's trying to lift me up, is also putting me in a bucket. And so I mean, I still have complex feelings about that, whether or not is that he threw cold water on me. That's a good thing, I think, but also embedded in that is a lot on both sides of it.
Did it help? Did it create an impact for you in any way, as far as like you making a change to be more bold, or how did that sit with you?
Not overnight, I mean, you don't, at that point I was, I don't know, 26, 27. And so
Hmm.
I'm not going to change overnight. And in general, I think my nature is I'm somewhat, um, I mean, I guess you could ask friends and family, but I think I'm somewhat introverted by nature, and also somewhat, I'm just not a super talkative. I'm not the life of the party usually, unless I'm uh, overtired or have had a couple of drinks or something. But rare occasions I'm maybe the life of the party, but I'm generally not. So, um, you know, but it did have an effect on my consciousness. I think as a writer,
Right.
especially, of like thinking about, um, how people are seen, how we're seen, and who's the person behind that kind of surface.
Absolutely. And I think that I don't know, I felt a lot of that with the show as well. So I mean, jumping into Interior Chinatown, which is now on Hulu and people can still watch it. What one of your biggest joys you would say in adapting this to a series?
Oh, I mean, one was working with the writers in the writers' room. That was really a special experience. It's my favorite part of the process, uh, still, because as a writer of books, I don't, get the opportunity to experience other people's creativity firsthand in that particular way. There's a lot of collaboration, but to be with other writers, I almost compare it to like training, in high school, when in the summers you'd like train for the team or whatever. It feels like that whenever I'm done with a writer's room, because I've been in several over the years. I I feel like I come out with like writer muscles, because being around that many other writers for a few hours every day for a few months, uh, it just, you're like steeped in other people's ideas and the way they see things. And I loved exploring all
Hmm.
these versions and ideas and parts, ways we could have done the show. We ultimately have to settle on one, but um, yeah, it's just, there's nothing like it in terms of like a collaborative. I mean, I imagine other people have had this experience in other collaborative things, either creative endeavors or even in like work. I mean, when you work as part of a team, there's just a joy in it. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but you've brought in a lot of different Asian American talent to actually work on this show, right? Behind the scenes as well.
Yes. Yeah. That was something that was important to me and to the producers. And, I will say Hulu and 20th, which was the studio and network and studio on the show, were both really supportive of that. So we had a lot of, I mean, writers, obviously cast, but the important thing is, yeah, behind the camera, we had, lots of heads of department and other members of the crew and creative team. So it was really, really, I mean, I had met multiple people. I mean, many people say this is the most diverse crew we've ever been a
Um,
part of. So that was really neat.
And that's a great compliment to hear, especially with all the changes that we've been seeing in Hollywood and the changes as they continue, right, for us as Asian Americans. Charlie, something I'm also interested in now, because you're a writer both in the publishing part as well as in Hollywood. So, would you say, are there any key differences when you see how each of these mediums treats Asian American stories?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I will say publishing feels a few years ahead of TV and film. I think, in recent, I don't know, the last decade or so, there's been a breakthrough of Asian American shows and movies that, or shows and movies featuring prominent Asian American characters, actors, storytellers. Um, and to the point now where it maybe feels even, I don't want to say unremarkable, but it doesn't feel like this kind of, uh, like before it would have been the talk of maybe the entire community of like, oh my God, go see this thing, because when's the next time we're going to get that chance? Now it's sort of, like there's enough that it's not once in a decade type thing. So that's really exciting. But I think in general, publishing is there's many more books than there are shows and movies every year. And there's just a really wide breadth of stories and people telling those stories out there. Um, I think there's probably also for reasons not worth going into, but mostly having to do with just like a lower investment cost, like a greater willingness to take risks on new voices, right? If you publish someone's book, it's not the same as making someone's show, which costs tens of millions of dollars, or more. So yeah, I think that's probably the sort of structural hurdle with TV and films. It's such a big investment, and people are risk averse, and so they want to see that there are numbers to back it up, basically. So
Yes, the return, right?
yeah, yep.
ROI on it. Many of your characters are caught between who they are and how the world sees them. And that was very fascinating to watch. Do you think that's uniquely an Asian American tension, or do you feel this is something universal?
I think it's universal. I mean, to me, the interesting version of the story was always, how can all of these characters eventually, be someone we could be interested in? How can we see the distance between the mask and the person behind the mask? And of course, we're starting from the perspective of Willis, played by Jimmy O Yang, and we're starting from the perspective of his family, his friends, Fatty, played by Ronnie Chang. But the circle broadens throughout the course of the season, so that you realize that all of these characters feel somewhat limited by their roles in this strange sort of environment that they live in this procedural universe. So to me, it's universal, but of course what the book and the show is trying to do is ground it specifically in aspects of that speak to the Asian American experience as a starting point. But to me, having a character like Willis as our lead and having his parents on screen is, of course, because we want people to see themselves on screen. That sort of representation is really important, and until recently was so rare for Asian Americans and for AAPI people. But to me, like, it's just as important that people can see themselves in Willis if they don't like Willis, right? That you can see yourself in his mom, that that no matter what your background is, that you can see yourself in someone who looks nothing like you, has nothing superficially in common. But if you have this kind of, shared experience, or that we're all human, and that we can tell stories through any of these characters that could speak to somebody.
True. Yeah, I felt like there was something actually within every character that somebody could relate to, right? Some type of emotion or even personal struggle that they're witnessing or going through, that we as human beings who are watching could say, oh my gosh, yeah, I could relate to this, whether it's fitting in or being loved or proving our worth or anything. I really enjoyed the way the show was done, and even the comical nuances. I mean, your leads, of course, were definitely perfect for the roles. I want to you mentioned AAPI voices, and in 2024 and even now, we are seeing more AAPI voices in television and film, but there's also been a little bit of a backlash. So what would you say gives you hope about where Asian American representation is headed in the upcoming years?
Well, I mean, what gives me the most hope is that it's not like backlash or, one or even, more than one sort of administrations, is going to completely snuff out the voice, a community of voices. I mean, there's I think enough momentum and enough support in lots of ways, both from the creative side to the, I think, infrastructure, I guess, of producers and executives that support these kinds of stories. That, yes, it's a tricky time for sure, and it's a risky time for sure for a lot of people. But I don't think that, I hope, I mean, this could all just be naively optimistic, but I just don't think that can go away. Now, if we were 10, 15 years ago, I think I'd feel different, that there's such a small number of people that had broken through. You might worry, well, are we going to have to wait a whole nother generation if we lose a few windows here? But I feel like I don't know. I guess I'm optimistic in that sense.
Oh, I'm optimistic with you, Charlie. And I think even just looking at the way the industry's been navigating, and like you were mentioning, the number of people now of Asian American descent that are in the business, I think that helps to the rise of it. There was a time when a lot of us were just pursuing degrees in medicine or in law or
Yeah.
business, but we see a huge influx of the community, no matter where you're from, just moving into entertainment. And that's where the stories are evolving. I want to jump back really quick to Westworld.
Sure.
Um, you as a writer on Westworld, do you feel, and other acclaimed shows, do you feel that working in sci-fi informed or expanded your perspective when it came to race or the narrative or cultural norms?
Hmm. Oh, I feel like we could do a whole, I mean, I don't know if anyone would be interested, but I would want to talk about
I
that for,
would.
for hours. um, I think there's something interesting about, I mean, the short answer is yes. To me, tell me if I'm answering the question or I'm misunderstanding it, but I feel like there's something about science fiction specifically that people are already more inclined to buy into something, to explore alternate possibilities to our reality. Even starting in season one of that show, I remember it was a big deal. There was an Asian American male character as one of the recurrings, played by Leonardo Nam, and he's one of the techs in the sort of underworld there. And it was just such a significant thing. And yet, I don't think it's a coincidence that like roles like that were maybe more prominent in shows that were already exploring sort of sci-fi or other genre universes. And in that case, we also had showrunners that I think were consciously trying, or on some level, trying to expand, the kinds of faces we're seeing on screen. I think Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan were both looking to do that. So I think their casting was just so perfect in so many ways, but also, had the effect of promoting change without having a, sort of message or agenda, just by casting people that look different.
Yes. And that's important. I remember covering the red carpet for that one, and just to see Leonardo on there and to be able to celebrate him. And again, it wasn't like replacing the token Asian American, right? That character is so well written into the storyline and brought in. And I think with sci-fi, I don't know, I feel like it's just a whole different universe that you get to play, you get to expand, you get to create so much more. It just seems like a fun playground to be a part of.
For sure. I started there. I'm returning to my roots with the project a couple of projects I'm working on now. And I just feel like everything I do, I usually end up going into something that's sort of speculative in some way, because it's a lot more fun.
I love it. Are you able to talk about any of the things that you're working on right now?
I could talk about one of them because it was announced not too long ago, which is I'm writing a pilot for Amazon, um, with based on a book, based on a series of books, but the pilot would be based on book one, basically, the show would be book one of the series, called The Culture Series by Ian M. Banks. He's a renowned science fiction author. And so it's not my book, which is great. I don't have to, it's wonderful to have a text to go to that's not your own, and that you want to be faithful to and honor the spirit of. And it's also just a beloved classic work. And we've got amazing producers on it. Chloe Zhao's company, Book of Shadows, and then Plan B, which is just, it's wonderful to be guided and to collaborate with them and to work with Amazon. So I'm hoping, I don't know yet how it'll go, but I'm working on the pilot now.
Well, that sounds like fun. Does it feel good to kind of get back into the sci-fi genre?
It feels great. It feels like, yeah, coming home in a way, because, I mean, not that Interior Chinatown was like a journey away from it, but I think there was something very specific and special case about, I wrote this book. It is personal in a lot of ways, and I spent so long on it, and got to live out my dreams in many ways, and work with some amazing people. But yeah, there's something about just like space opera and these big ideas, but also having fun, within this genre that is really exciting.
Charlie, I love how you said I got to live out my dreams. Can you give us a few brief words on how does that feel? Because not everybody gets to reach that point, or sometimes they do, but they don't necessarily get to talk about it. How was that moment for you?
Um, you know, it feels unreal at first, and then like, it's human nature. Then it becomes a job for a while, and then you do the job. Because you're like, oh my god, I have to go to work. It's like 4 a.m. and call time is, and I'm like writing, I'm rewriting, I'm on set, I'm doing things, and so it's like incredibly difficult job, but also it is like, I mean, it's literally months, then even years of just continually getting challenged and getting, invigorated and being pushed all the way, creatively, emotionally, just to like try to make the most of it. Yeah, it took a lot out of a lot of people, including my family, my wife and kids, and so all of that was just, and you look back and it's almost like now with a bit of perspective, having finished, it feels like, oh my god, I can't believe I did. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
it's so, in the front end it's amazing, through the middle it's still amazing, but there are times when it's very trying, and then coming out of the sort of tunnel, it's, I think I'm looking back now and just like, like grateful and in awe that we got to do it.
It was a beautiful moment. As I was talking to you before we were recording, that I was fortunate enough to be at the premiere and celebrate in that room. And I think the one thing I really, really loved was there was so much love for you and for your team. And I just felt like there was a family of people that were really out there and supporting it. And then I think just to feel proud that there was a story like this representing the community where people felt like they were a part of something. I left with that feeling that night. And I thought that really stuck with my heart.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm glad you felt that, because I felt it too, and I think that was real. That we, cast, crew, everyone involved, just felt like we, people brought their passions and their interests and their creativity to it every day. And I can't tell you how many conversations I had with, everyone from sound, camera, hair, makeup, like all of the departments, production design, and of course the actors and producers and writers, like people just sharing things like what this meant to them to work on this, and of all races, and all backgrounds, and
Mhm.
you know, not just the AAPI, but certainly, Asian Americans as well. As it meant a lot, I think, and it meant a lot to me that people cared that much.
There was magic. Well, since you have this magic for our young writers that are out there from underrepresented communities, what advice would you give them when it comes to telling stories that feel both personal and politically resonant?
Well, one, don't listen to my advice. That's my take this all with a grain of salt, because I've made plenty of mistakes and I'm gonna make more. But um, I really think it's to, and this is just so trite, like, but it really is to like find your own voice. I think that, like, I can't say it enough. Like, if chasing something else or chasing what you think people want is, I mean, sure, some people may succeed that way, but for me, the that's a different that's a different experience. I think is a different endeavor to be like trying to sell something or try to find the piece that fits into the mold, versus like cultivating things that you're actually interested in, no matter how personal or idiosyncratic they feel. If it's authentically interesting to you, chances are it'll eventually be authentically interesting to someone else if you develop the craft around, saying how to say it and how to tell that
Wow.
story. It can find a home, and that, I'm not saying that means everyone gets a TV show or everyone gets a novel, but I think if it starts from that place, that it has a higher chance actually of finding an audience.
And I think we're so fortunate with the times that we're in right now in a way too, right? Because I know when I was growing up, I'm in the same age range as you are. Like there was that thing of when you come from an immigrant family, I was trying to find that balance. It's almost like skewing as to how much of my story or my authentic voice can I share because I want to fit in. I want to be a part of this community, or I need to find that dream job that I want and how to get there. But I feel like now as communities and societies have evolved, we are at this place where you get to share your voice. You get to share that authenticity. And there are people out there who will resonate, and you have the freedom to do it in a way.
Yeah, I think
Right?
that's so true. Yes, I think it's an amazing thing. I mean, yeah, I hope that my teenagers and their generation really appreciates that and feels like feels not just like allowed to do it, but that they're excited to do it, that they want to share their voices and their experiences and their ways of seeing things. Because I think it's absolutely vital that we keep doing that. I mean, that's how we got to where we are.
I totally agree with you. There's so many more stories to tell. Well, we want to do a fun little lightning round with you. So these are quick, just whatever comes top of mind, 5-second answers. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Book you wish that you had wrote.
Hunger Games, because then I would be a billionaire.
Favorite screenwriting snack?
Macadamia nuts, because they're healthy. Sorry.
I know, we got to get rid of the sugar, right?
Yeah.
Most relatable fictional character?
Charlie Brown.
Okay. Your favorite to work with again, Jimmy O Yang, Ronnie Chang, or Taika Waititi?
None of them. They're all jerks. Chloe Bennett.
Alternate title for your memoir?
Do It Yourself.
And one word to describe your writing style?
Messy.
Love it. By the way, that sugar thing is becoming an issue for me too. Not very happy about that right now.
It's real.
It is real. It is real. Charlie, where can our viewers and listeners find you or follow you to keep up to date on what you're doing?
Kind of nowhere. I mean, I'm on X, but I'm sort of not. But if someone were desperately trying to get a message to me, that's probably the best way. I'm also on LinkedIn. Okay. I love saying that because like people are like, that's hilarious, but
hey, it's a great way to connect with people, and they take you seriously. Okay, so I think it's a great place to be. Well, this has been such a pleasure. Is there a website or anything that you want to refer them to?
I do have an author website, but it's not like a place you can it's charlesuauthor.com. But if you want to read things about me or, see a picture of me, there you go.
That's a place to go. Well, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for making time to come out and speak with us and share your journey. Is there anything else you'd like to share before I wrap up here?
No, I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, so did I. And to anybody who has not watched Interior Chinatown, I really highly recommend it. You should have already seen it by now, but if you haven't, you still have time to catch up. And once again, I want to thank you, Charlie Yu, for joining us. And for all of our viewers and our listeners, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any ideas or any guest questions, please do feel free to send them in to us. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our program on your favorite podcast platforms. And remember to follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and of course, our YouTube channel. Also, a friendly reminder that Asian Pacific Voices Radio is produced by Asian Culture and Media Alliance. We're a nonprofit that empowers the Asian Pacific American communities with a voice through media arts. So if you'd like to support the program, please do connect with us at acmasocal.org. Once again, I'm Rasha Goel. Thank you so much for joining me for another great empowering episode of Asian Pacific Voices Radio podcast. Until next time, be safe, have fun, and enjoy yourselves.